Hello and welcome back to what can only be described as probably the most exciting way to learn about a history exam on the planet at the moment. Thanks for sticking with me and watching the second part of Route A, Unit 1. This is going to be question 2A, question 2B and question 2C on how to answer your GCSE or top tips or advice on how to answer your GCSE Germany in transition from 1919 to 1947. Okay, moving on. As you know, in the last video, we looked at question 1A, 1B, and 1C with top tips and advice on how to answer that. Now we're going to look at question 2. And that's going to be question 2A, 2B, and 2C. Question 2A, again, remembering that these are tiered with question 2A going to 4 marks, okay? Question 2B being 6. And then we got a larger question as opposed to 1C, 2C being a 10 mark there, which is a new question, and it's the discussion of different historical interpretations. Nothing to worry about, some say challenging. However, I will walk you through it step by step, and you will see that there is a process really to follow that will get you those, shall I say, lower level marks, and then it will give you plenty of opportunity to add your own knowledge. Okay, so moving on, I just thought it was important to show that we are just looking at question 2 on the exam paper here of the new strengthened approach for the 2015 GCSE exams. We look at question 3 in the next video. That'll be Unit 1 done and dusted with the possibility of obtaining 53 marks. Okay, let's shoot on. Before we begin, I cannot stress enough to decode every question. There's a text message coming through. Probably a historian, you know, asking for advice as well. But you need to consider the command words, okay, in every question. And you'll see a few of them coming up. Well, they'll all be there, you know. Certainly explain and describe are there. There's no real need for me to furtherly explain, but explain it just to provide a number of reasons showing how or why each contributed to the event named in the question. Describe, provide specific factual detail upon the key issue named in the question, and then you have these kind of evaluative questions which will certainly need to come down with a judgment upon the named event or the person, supported by reasons, explanations and evidence. Okay, we'll go more into the detail of the how important, how successful or how useful has been seen in the evaluation of the 2 sources, which I believe is in question 1C. But we will move on. There's plenty of advice that can be given along the way with regards to these command words. But just remember, I would expect this of you in every question. It's, you know, it just makes sense. It's logical. You look at that question. Are they asking you to explain, describe, or have you got one of these evaluative questions? Really, that's as far as you want to go. There's not going to be any extra marks for evaluation if they've just asked you to explain and describe. However, there will be no marks given if you just describe or explain something of one of these questions. It's the same question. It's just I've tried to put in as many alternative phrases that those questions can be termed as. Okay, so moving on and switching my mobile phone to silent. Okay, so question 2A will come in with, look, one of those command words straight away. It's describe. So describe the, and it'll be something after this. We'll see, because we're doing Germany here. It will be different for, when I'm saying that, the beginning of the question will be the same. For instance, for China under Mao Zedong, but for Germany it'll be describe the life of women or the role of women in Germany is I think what we're going to come up against. But it could be describe the describe the, I'm going off my head here, but describe the, well, I wouldn't really say the importance, but describe the role of Hitler Youth, or describe the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so you're just looking at drawing out a description there. It's a descriptive question. Okay, it's worth 4 marks, and it's the deployment of knowledge on a historical event or feature. As I said, there we go. It's a descriptive question, and it requires a descriptive answer. Okay. This question demands own knowledge only. There are no sources for you to use. Okay, so this is completely off your mind, memory, and revision. And we'll go into that one. So the example of question 2A, which I'm using, is describe how life for women living in Germany changed between 1933 and 1939. Okay, so you have Hitler coming into power, 1933, and then 1939, you have Germany going into war. Okay, if you know that on your timeline, well, great. Let's go for it. Let's move this up there, and then we can have a look at the answer that was given. Okay, so here we go. During the Weimar period, women had made considerable progress in achieving equality with men. They had gained the vote, they had gone to university, obtained degrees, and followed careers. Some had followed fashion, worn makeup, smoked, and drank in public. Many of these gains were reversed after 1933, when the Nazi Party came into power. Nazi attitudes towards women were very traditional. Women were expected to give up their jobs, get married, and start a family. They wanted them to be domesticated, yeah? They were to follow the 3 Ks, children, kitchen, and church, and their focus was to be the home and family life. They were discouraged from wearing makeup, trousers, or from dyeing their hair. Men occupied all dominant roles in society, and women were in the background, confined to the home. Okay, so there's a nice 4-mark answer there. Okay, I mean, using your own knowledge, you don't have to stick to that. You could mention things about the Mother's Cross, for instance. You could certainly mention about, but you were describing how life has changed between those years. Okay, yes, there is a little bit of drawing on years previously. From 1933, obviously, because you were using that for maybe a comparative reason. So it does show that use your time frame from 1919 up until 1939 to give that sort of change in role. Okay. What you could do, something that would be important to mention there, is maybe, well, I would say stop at 1939. Don't go into the war and how women were asked to go back to work, okay? You're going to waste your time because it's simply looking at that period, okay? So, if we move on, hints for question 2A would be, you must identify and describe at least 2 or 3 key features, okay? Aim for 2 or 3 to get in there. And comment on them, okay, using as much outside knowledge or your own knowledge as you can. Again, there's no sources really to draw upon, but you may have come across a few sources. This isn't guaranteed, but you may have come across a few sources which can lead you to using certain phrases, using certain examples, so you may be fortunate there, but I cannot guarantee that is not 100%, okay? So, only include information that is directly relevant. Please don't go off on a tangent and start mentioning about Hitler's foreign policy or perhaps the Treaty of Versailles. It's not needed. Stick to the role of women there, and that is really quality answers you are given rather than ramblings, and you really are wasting your time on that question by sort of just mentioning general facts about the Nazi regime. Stick to women. That's what the questions asked you. Women, so stick to that, okay? If it asked about anti-Semitism, stick to anti-Semitism. Don't deviate onto women. And obviously, if it asked about describe Germany's involvement in World War II, stick to World War II and don't really mention any of the other two because they're kind of not applicable there, all right? So I hope that helps. As I've just gone into there, be specific, avoid generalized comments. You get more for mentioning specific terms, specific treaties. As I said, it's fine. You don't feel you've got to write in German for this. But I mean, if you can kind of get certain phrases in there, like the 3Ks, kitchen, church, and children, kitchen, and church, please get those in there as much as possible, okay? However, if you forget, put them into your own words. It's still, the more points there will make more prizes. Okay, so we will move on to question 2b. This again will start with, why was source F produced in? And what this question is purpose of creation. You're finding the purpose. What is the purpose of a source, a primary source which has been created? Okay, so this is going to be a primary source here, which is going to come from the time, okay, from the contemporary time during the period you've been studying. It's not going to be a reflection, so it's not somebody writing upon it. It's going to be from that period. And they want to know, if you can think of it that way, why this source was produced. Was it used for propaganda? Was it a speech that was made to rally morale so that they would fight? Was it a photograph that was taken? In certain exams, you'd be looking at another method of, certainly if we were looking at Russia, to a later point, how the photoshopping, even though it wasn't known as that, would have been used. So there's a few interesting things, but if you think of some of the primary sources that would be available in Nazi Germany, a lot of them would be of propaganda purposes, because it was some argue it wasn't a totalitarian state, but it certainly was a police state, and you can get into a lot of trouble for any publication that would go against the regime. Okay, the question in itself is not necessarily going to be propaganda, okay, and actually the one that comes up isn't the one that I'm going to use here, but if it is propaganda, there's plenty you can write on that, I mean, anti-Semitism, the role of the woman, the role of education, and the perfect ideal of the Nazi regime and the Aryan breed, that's all in there. As I said, what we wanted to do here is to place a singular source in its historical context of when it was produced. Think of it as a piece in a jigsaw puzzle, okay? Think, and I'll demonstrate that right here now, okay? Do not evaluate the source. We're not looking for you to actually say whether this is useful. We are simply asking you, and this again is emphasis on why you should really reread or read and reread that question to make sure you understand it. Why was this source produced in? There's not a how useful, how important, okay? You could certainly maybe mention, but then I would just stick to what you see there. Perhaps I'm sort of saying things that maybe might not get you extra marks. And if we have a look at the example of question 2b, sorry for the picture here, but it is. If we look at the question, why was source F produced in the late 1940s? Okay, now the late 1940s, if you know your stuff, and I'm sure you would, okay, this is a period, late 1940s is going to be after 1945, which means that the Second World War is over, which means that the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, okay, has been brought down. And if we have a look at source A, we have a look at roll call at Auschwitz I on Christmas Eve. This was painted by a camp prisoner during the late 1940s. So this prisoner has been liberated, okay, or emancipated. So it's a memoir in a pictorial form of what actually took place, or through his eyes, what was actually going on in the camps. Okay. Again, this picture is a little bit blurry. It was the one that I got out of the book, so apologies. I tried to Google it and get a crisper and clearer image. I couldn't do that, but this one was available. And as I said, I'm working from home, so I had to take a snap with my mobile picture. But I'll try and talk you through certain points. Okay. Let's go through the answer. Source A is a painting showing roll call at Auschwitz extermination camp on a Christmas Eve in the early 1940s. Okay, so as you can see, it's mentioning early 1940s. Be very careful there. He hasn't come in and said that it took place in late 1940s. That couldn't have happened. The camps were, as I said, they were liberated. They were either destroyed by the Nazis themselves. But anyway, that's going into content more than anything. Let's stick to this answer. So that person has showed knowledge that it was painted, or it depicts roll call in the 1940s, okay, or early 1940s. It shows the prisoners lined up and in the process of being counted by SS guards. One prisoner is being beaten by a guard. This highlights the brutality by which the prisoners were treated. A number of prisoners have died and their corpses are piled up under a tree. The painting shows the horrors of camp life and the harsh treatment of the prisoners, most of whom were Jews. The artist painted this scene sometime during the late 1940s, and as he had been a prisoner at Auschwitz, he had first-hand experience of how the Jewish prisoners were treated. By the late 1940s, the full horrors of what had taken place in the extermination camps were becoming more widely known and had been highlighted at the Nuremberg war trials. The painting was executed from memory, and the motive of the artist might have been to record an aspect of the Holocaust to show the true horrors of what had taken place at Auschwitz and camps like this. So I think that is a great answer there. As I said, these are top mark answers, and it's going in, if you can think about it, it's explaining, perhaps writing down exactly what you see there, and don't be scared to draw a little circle and write little notes on your exam paper. You're going to be leaving them in the exam anyway. Just, say what you see. You can then write it in a fluid, as you can see, the questions, or rather the answers, are getting longer. And there's nothing wrong with you doing little bullet points, thinking, we're not asking you to evaluate the source, but what we are asking you to do is to tell us why it was produced. Now, this person has given a great answer, mentioning the Nuremberg war trials and wanting to highlight the atrocities of the brutality, the violence in the Auschwitz, which would have been the death camps then. So there are plenty of things that you can actually get in there. Okay, there really, really are. But again, why it was produced? Because this person wanted to release these hidden secrets of what was going on behind closed doors in Auschwitz, okay, or wanted to show the injustice. It's a person, a Holocaust survivor, that actually went through that experience and really wanted to record and show to others the horrifying difficult and hard subject matter to discuss, and sometimes perhaps paintings can provide that better than words. However, that, I would say, is a great answer for that type of question, and I hope we can give you a couple of hints here, which will also benefit you. You must refer to the content of the source and explain what it shows, okay, which that person has done. Candidates are well advised to concentrate on the date so they can show evidence that they know what was taking place at that time and why the piece was produced. Very important, okay. That question is very, I would say, kind of tricky, because you've got the mentioning of the late 40s and the early 40s. If you know your timelines, bam, you can really show off there. And again, think about timeline. If it was a source that was produced before Hitler had come into power, please mention Hitler's not in power. Okay, it shows that you are taking that little piece of that jigsaw puzzle and you are placing it in its right position. That is context. That's when you put something in context, you are using it in the correct place. Okay. Another hint we've got here. Use your own knowledge to say what was happening at the time the source was produced. Okay, so we really are asking to draw on your own revision and your own strengths, and I won't say interpretation, but I will say your wisdom or knowledge, for want of a better word, of what is happening and why that source has been produced. Okay, could be a pamphlet, could be a poster, could be a cartoon. Again, that would be a source to think about, a cartoon that is being produced. You don't get so many in Germany, okay, unless it's propaganda purposes against the Jewish race, or anti-Semitism, or against other countries. Likewise, if it comes from America or the UK, please bear in mind that this is happening outside of Nazi Germany. Okay, all right, so we can move on. Once I just mentioned that you must make use of the attribution, as this can help to identify motive and help explain why the source was produced at the time. Attribution, think of it this way: if something has an attribute, it has a quality, and you want to find out what that quality is, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Okay, is it reliable? The attributions. Who wrote it? Who produced it? In this example, we can say, yes, it was a Holocaust survivor, and it's coming from past experience, past memories. Again, if you would like to turn around and write this person, you could say that memory is something that could be questioned, but again, you were not asked to evaluate the source. You were simply asked to explain why it was created, okay, the purpose of it. Okay, so moving on, question 2C will start. Here's, maybe we could class this as being the first big boy in the exam paper, but bear with me on this one and I'll show you exactly what to do. Okay, so the question will be, one interpretation is that, and then it will give you an interpretation of history, okay, of Germany. One interpretation is that Hitler brought the figure of employment down massively and was very successful at doing that. How far do you agree with this interpretation? Okay, that's not going to be the question we're going to use. I'm just using that as an example. If we look at what this, the requirements is a discussion of different historical interpretations. So the requirements of this question is for you to understand and discuss different historical interpretations, but they actually give you those historical interpretations. Okay, so let's go through it. The focus of this is to show that the student recognizes that there are different interpretations of history. Okay, so you have to show that you recognize that not all of these interpretations that are given are following the same thing, the same theme. And I'll explain, I'll also demonstrate how this is quite easily done. This can be a challenging question. As I've said, at first glance, I thought to myself, oh boy, this is something that perhaps they should have put in at A-level, but they give you so much opportunity here, and they really do make it easy. It's just a little bit of thought you need there, okay? And as I said, there are handouts available that cover historical interpretations of all of the modules that I can hand to you. If any of you guys out there are a little bit concerned of the major themes of what's going on with historical interpretation, and you want to give yourself a little bit of extra comfort or extra revision or understanding, please feel free to get in touch, either by commenting on the YouTube, emailing me with my college address, or simply getting a message to me face to face, or if you're friends on me with Facebook me. You couldn't tweet me because I'm not on Twitter, but maybe one day. Hey, so let's move on. So example of question 2C will be this. This is the one I got out of the book. Now, of course, if I paste up the evidence on screen here, it'll get a little bit confusing. So let's see if I'm that good with PowerPoint. Historians have made different interpretations about why the Night of the Long Knives took place. Again, it'll give you this little piece of advice underneath the three parts of evidence. We'll return to those now. One interpretation is that the Night of the Long Knives took place because Rome was planning a putsch, right, a takeover to seize power in Germany. How far do you agree with this interpretation? Right. There we go. They've given you one interpretation, is that the Night of the Long Knives took place because Rome was planning a takeover to seize power in Germany. Well, okay, let's have a look at evidence 1. We click on this. Evidence 1. This evidence is part of Hitler's speech to the Reichstag on the 13th of July 1934, in which he justified why he had taken action against Rome. Now, I'm not going to be tempted to try and do a Hitler accent, okay, but after the month of May, there could be no further doubt that the Chief of Staff, Röhm, was busied with ambitious schemes which, if realised, could only lead to the most violent disturbances. The preparations made for the revolt were very extensive. Only ruthless and bloody intervention could prevent the revolution from spreading. Now, if you know your stuff, Hitler's excuse was that Ernst Röhm, was going to go for a secondary social revolution, all right? You don't really need to know that, okay? But we'll go back and we'll have a look at evidence 2, and then we will sort of go through the answer and you can see what is happening here. Evidence 2, this evidence is a cartoon by David Lowe, which appeared in a British newspaper known as the London Evening Standard on the 3rd of July 1934. Goering is standing to Hitler's right dressed as a Viking hero, and Goebbels is on his knees behind Hitler. The caption underneath says, "They salute with both hands now." Okay, there's plenty of things you can read into that source if we were asking you to read into that source. However, we are asking you to remain to interpretation. Now, the third one, so let's not try and get bogged down too much. Evidence 3, this evidence is from an interpretation about the Night of the Long Knives written by the historian F.L. Karsten in his book The Rise of Fascism, and that's in 1967. So we see a little bit of a change, a little bit of a more recent date there. And certainly after 1934, when the Night of the Long Knives took place, certainly after the Second World War. So anyway, this reads, tension increased during June 1943, but it is certain that Rome did not prepare. That should say June 1934. Gee, read me and my typing, I'm so sorry about that. But it is certain that Rome did not prepare for a putsch. He sent his men on leave and retired to his house in Weissy, in Bavaria, where he expected a visit from Hitler. But Rome's opponents, above all Himmler, the leader of the SS, and some army leaders, succeeded in convincing Hitler that he was planning a putsch, a takeover. Hitler decided to side with the stronger battalions and against his old friend and protector. Okay, let's go back and let's have a look. And apologies for that 1943. It's 1934 in that last piece of evidence. That'll mean I'll have to go do the video all over again. Joy. Now, if we pull up here, the answer. Now, let's go back to the question, first of all. One interpretation is that the Night of the Long Knives took place because Rome was planning a putsch to seize power in Germany. How far do you agree with this interpretation? Well, only one piece of evidence supports the interpretation that the Night of the Long Knives took place because Rome was planning a putsch to seize power in Germany, and that is evidence 1. Okay, so you're just playing detective. I mean, they've given you 3 different types, or 2 different types of, 2 different types of interpretation. So he's stating that the first one, it's only Hitler in his speech that's saying Rome really was planning a putsch to take over. The information in this source comes from a speech Hitler gave to the Reichstag on the 30th of July 1934, in which he attempted to justify the actions he had taken to have Rome and other SA leaders arrested. Hitler claimed that Rome was in the advanced stages of planning a revolution to overthrow the government, and that he was forced to act swiftly to stop this from happening. This evidence provides a biased view of events and is very critical of Rome, as Hitler had to explain why he had taken action against the leader of the SS. No, sorry, of the SA. Okay, the answer continues then. A different interpretation is presented in evidence 2, which suggests that Hitler took action to increase his control over the SA and win the support of the army. Yes, you can see that in that cartoon. This is a cartoon by David Lowe, which appeared in the London Evening Standard newspaper a few days after the Night of the Long Knives had taken place. Being a British cartoon, it was not subject to censorship, and although it is exaggerated, the interpretation presented by Lowe represents the view held by many that Hitler had much to gain by eliminating Rome. He needed the support of the army, and the SA leadership stood in the way of securing that support, so Rome had to go. Evidence 3 supports this interpretation. This is a research piece of work by the historian F.L. Karsten, which was written with the benefit of hindsight, and it comes to the conclusion that Rome was not planning any revolution, quite the opposite. Rome had sent the SA leadership away on holiday, but Himmler had persuaded Hitler that this was a disguise and the threat from the SA was real. Hitler was therefore persuaded to take action. I think when you actually look at those answers, you can see what you're meant to do there. There will be 3 pieces of evidence. Eliminate the ones which they may all have different interpretations, different points of view, different, ideas of why something happened. But if you could sift through that, then I think you will have, even if they're all the same, you can still write 3 paragraphs on each, saying all of these interpretations are the same, and therefore I agree with this interpretation. However, I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think there will be maybe two which will go one way and another one will go another way. I'm hoping, but again, I can't promise you, that all three don't go in different interpretations, but I don't think so. I think they'll have ones that will show you that, you know, sort of throw you in the right direction. I'm hoping, but I can't guarantee. So to finalize, and your last little, as you notice, this may look like a lot of writing, but this is quite big print here. So looking at all three pieces of evidence, I disagree with the interpretation that the Night of the Long Knives took place because Rome was planning a putsch. This is the view presented by evidence one, but it is very biased view, which was deliberately presented in that way to justify what Hitler had done. A more accurate interpretation is that presented in the academic research piece, evidence three, which concludes that there was no plot by Rome and the plot was invented to provide an excuse to get rid of him. Evidence 2, although biased in its portrayal of events, is accurate in its conclusions that the event took place to increase Hitler's power. I'm hoping that all of those answers there will show you or give you some sort of formula of what you are meant to do. And that really is, if you can think of yourself as being on a jury, you would just, or a detective, but I kind of like the analogy of being in a jury and these three bits of evidence are put towards you, you will just then feel your way through them, read them, and make a choice of which ones, if we go back to the question, which ones, for instance, agree with the Night of the Long Knives taking place because Rome was planning a putsch, and you could put those and say, well, evidence one is the only one that backs this up because it's Hitler saying it. However, evidence 2 doesn't show that. Evidence 3 certainly doesn't. And then you can come down and give you your reasons in a nice little paragraph at the end, okay? But if we go through that, write for each of the pieces of evidence to show that you do understand them, okay? And if you notice, a lot of that is taken from the actual pieces of evidence and put in there, okay? And then come down. It's a judgment question. Be a judge. As I said, be on the jury, but make a judgment, okay? Now, hints for this type of question. You need to identify which sources or sources support the interpretation and which source or sources provide alternative interpretations. So stick close to that question and you can tick, that one agrees with it, that one agrees with it, but this one is going as an alternative interpretation. And again, there's something else for you to write in your final paragraph. You need to discuss the content of the sources and their attributions to help you explain how and why these interpretations have been formed. The attribution, as we said, what are the qualities? In this last question, it's pointed out certainly the attribution of Hitler's speech is that it is to justify. I mean, he's he doesn't want people in Germany thinking he's done the wrong thing, so he justifies his actions there. His ulterior motive is to gain more power. The attribution of the second cartoon is that it is propaganda, but again, it's an open interpretation because it's not curbed by any censorship. It's in a different country, so there is freedom of press there, freedom of speech compared to the Nazi regime or the Nazi state. And the final attributes of the last piece of evidence are really with hindsight, and that it's written by a historian who would have taken all of these primary sources, evaluated them himself, and he would have come across or would have come up with an interpretation which gave a more balanced and a more thoughtful interpretation. Okay, so big things to write about there. That really is question 2C, which means we've come to the end of the exam technique presentation for question 2. And I'll hopefully see you in the third one. And I hope all of this is making sense. Please leave messages, comments, likes, dislikes, not too much abuse on the YouTube channel. And I will catch up with you as soon as I can. Thanks for listening.